And they didn't even give me my own Concordia hat. So I found a baseball cap I can wear that I have this old Kangol type of Concordia thing. I mean, because I can't walk around in India with this. So I'm with 7th degree burn. Well, yeah, I mean, for burns. Yeah, I don't care if you're bald, but the sun's a little strong in that part of the world. You know, it's cooled off quite a bit there now. It's 95.
Oh, pretty luxury.
Yeah, but they have really bad air pollution, so it's like 110 because it's like the greenhouse effect.
Oh yeah,
so
part of India?
Hyderabad, south, the hot part, the hot part of India. But it should be interesting. But they have like, you know, tiny cars and stuff there because of the way their traffic works. So I had to email the guy who's like taking us around and inform him of my size and make sure he brings an appropriate vehicle. So I think they're going to bring a moving van. So it's just kind of stick me in the back of it.
One of those like bicycle little carriage things that you try to.
Well, yeah, the rickshaws, yeah. But they have gas powered ones too that are, I think they're built like on top of mopeds or something.
Yeah. So
I kind of want to take one of those just for the video. But I don't know. I don't think I'll fit because when I mentioned that to one of my Indian grad students, they laughed. Like that was a ridiculous thing to even consider trying. But it would be funnier to go up to one of the guys on the actual bicycle.
Yeah, I think you have to do it now.
Well, I mean, they have gas powered ones.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Yeah. Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah. That's like, look, how much did it take me 7 miles? And just like, I mean, it doesn't take that much work, but like really try to look like extra fat, like, you know, push the stomach out and and make sure you get him at the bottom of the hill so he has to climb. I just video record the response. See how desperate they are. All right, what class is this? Unity. All right, so we're making pumpkins disappear.
How can you update Unity? Do you like do it whenever?
I pretty much, unless it's a major update, if I'm in the middle of a semester, I don't update it. Every now and then I accidentally hit it, and it usually isn't a problem, but every now and then it does become a weird version issue or something. So I would say I update it once a year on purpose when they do the major revisions, or if I'm only working on projects myself, I'll do it. But if I'm serving code to other people, I pretty much just try to agree upon a version at the beginning of the semester and say, this is it, and just go from there. So I'm on 2018.2.5 F1. That's my version. If you have another F2 or 3 after that, it's probably not a problem. But just for the sake of protection, I wear my name tag today so everybody knows who I am. And also so I don't forget it. The shirt's going to India, so this is going to make it there one way or another. Oh, this is why you asked. Yeah, so I'm going to skip the new version. Oh, it actually is a somewhat 2.10. Somewhat of a medium-sized update, but I'm going to still skip it. All right, so let's run this real quick. We should have our pumpkins flying by. Our guy respawns. He is invincible for a certain period of time. But we're going to see over here we have a zillion pumpkins that stay in existence forever and ever and ever.
Did he respond?
Oh, did he not respond? Why didn't he respond? Did we leave it in a bad position with all our changes at the end? Because I know we were implementing his solution. All right, so I think we moved the golem.
Oh yeah. I think like we tried like
having the script run after he dies, but it didn't work.
Oh, yeah. You were asking whether we can start the coroutine and then kill off the script, right? Yeah. So that's this respawn golem thing, but then we are destroying the game object here. So so this guy's never going to respawn from this side of things. So one thing we could do is we could choose not to kill him off and respawn him. We could just leave him there but make him invincible, something like that. Or we can immediately destroy him like we did here. So then our golem with the script attached to it will be dead. Well, I'll leave that code there. We're never actually calling it now. And then from the pumpkin's perspective, when he bumps into a where's my on collision enter this guy? When he bumps into a golem or a player, he bumps into a player, he's going to remember the position and the transform of that player. That way we can respawn him in the same place where he was before. Instead of just always putting him at the position of that prefab, where it was always at whatever, the 0, wherever he originally placed him. So we're also destroying the collided object here. So we're actually destroying it twice. So we can probably make an argument here that since the only thing we're doing inside the golem is destroying ourselves, we might as well go ahead and let the pumpkin kill us off. So we can let the pumpkin do the one who's killing us off. That'll save us a little bit of logic where this guy doesn't have to deal with collisions programmatically. We'll go ahead and dump his respawn golem since we're not going to use that. We'll just simplify this script. Then we'll go back here to the pumpkin. So what does the pumpkin do? Collision enter. He remembers the position of and the transform of the player, destroys the player, starts the respawn golem coroutine. Respawn golem waits for 2 seconds, spawns a brand new golem. Now we did a we're actually doing it twice here. So we're going to take this and set that up. So we're going to instantiate our golem. So this is our prefab we passed in, and this is the transform where we want him to appear. We'll go ahead and capture that guy inside of new golem so we can do stuff with him. So we'll set his position right there. Actually, didn't we see that his position should get set by this guy? There's the player we collide with. So we do need to so we have some variables up here. We were remembering our colliders, right? So we remembered the dude we collided with here. I don't think that's actually going to be needed. We have like 3 solutions wound into each other. Okay, so dude's dead. We know where he lives. We come in here. We wait for 2 seconds. We spawn him in that position, but now we want him to be invincible. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set, these should all be new golem based. Oh, that we do need to set this because this gives us the collider for that guy. Because we're going to go ahead and grab the collider associated with the golem we just created so that the turn off invincible can turn that collider back on. So we're going to grab the collider associated with the golem we just created. We will then disable that collider. Then we're going to start our coroutine for turn off invincible, which waits for 3 seconds. And at the end of those 3 seconds, he just turns his collider back on. So now he's no longer invincible. All right, so that's what that guy does. So that should be good on that end. So that's the pumpkin doing the invincibility thing. His solution last time was to do the invincibility part inside of golem movement. Right here, when a golem is first born, when he awakes, we grab his collider, we grab his rigid body, we turn off his collider, we start the coroutine. I don't know, make invincible. We really want this to turn off invincibility, right? So make invincible. So this makes him invincible. This will undo him in 3 seconds where we turn the collider off. And this is just how all golems behave. So every single golem that has this script attached to him, or every single game object that has this script attached to them, when it's created, it'll grab that guy's collider. It'll set it to off. 3 seconds later, it'll set it to on. That's how golems behave. So if we do it that way, if we have a golem work that way, then over here in the pumpkin, we don't have to deal with his collider and making him invincible and all that stuff. So that's why we had this commented out. So we don't need to get the collider associated with the golem. We don't need to disable it. We don't need to start this other coroutine to turn off invincibility. None of these things are things anymore because that's how all golems behave. They start off invincible and 3 seconds later they now can be hit. Okay, so if we wanted to really bring this into, if we wanted to just streamline it, we would do that. Where, what do? We respawn a golem at a certain position. We don't need to turn off invincibility in here. So streamline this guy. On collision enter, we grab the position, we grab the transform, we destroy the golem. We no longer do this stuff. We just respawn the golem. And that should be it. So pumpkins kill golems, then respawn them. Golems are invincible, then become uninvincible. All right, so let's run this and we should be back to normal. All right, he's dead. Now he's back, but he's invincible, so I can get him out of the way. And he goes back and does his normal thing. Although he seems to be always appearing over in the original location. He's back in the middle, isn't he?
Mine's like every time the golem respawns, it takes like about a second or two, and then he like slides back. No, I already like.
Oh, it's because you have to go into his rigid body in the prefab.
Yeah, I like froze his position.
But make sure you hit apply.
Oh, you're right.
So click the golem for freeze his position on Y and Z, and then click apply up here. Okay. So the prefab gets that too. All right, so let's look why he's not showing up in the same place. So a pumpkin gets the position and the transform. We really actually only need the transform. And then when we spawn the golem, we can spawn the original. We can, so the transform we were passing is the parent. Let me try something here real quick. I'm going to set this to true, and if this works, then I'll explain why it works. I'm going to force this in world space. Nope, that didn't work. Any other options we have for instantiate? So you have 10 versions of this guy. Okay, we can do it at a position with a rotation. All right, so let's do that. So instead of the transform, we're going to do it at this dot golem pause. And then how do I get the default rotation? How do I get a rotation of nothing? Yeah. Quaternion dot identity. Now, if I remember correctly, this is actually going to spawn our dude facing backwards, because that's what the prefab had. It had him facing backwards for his rotation, because we actually have his rotation set at what, 0, 180, 0, I believe. So we'll probably make a little update there for a second. Or we'll just grab his rotation. That'll probably be the better way of doing it. But let's make sure he's in the right spot now, just facing the wrong way. All right, because there's 10 versions of instantiate. We're calling the one that says, what am I instantiating? Where am I instantiating it in terms of position, not in terms of transform, and then the rotation of that guy. Because the ones that took transform were saying, here's the parent of the dude. So I could create like an empty game object somewhere and then make him the child of that empty game object if I wanted to by giving it the transform. But that's not what we really want to accomplish here. We want him to just positionally be at where he died. All right, so we'll have our death over here, and I'm going to predict that he's going to die and come back in the same spot but facing backwards. All right, yep, there he is. So now he's facing backwards. So we just need to fix his rotation now, and then we'll be back in business. So how can we how can we set his rotation to the right thing? 2 ways we can accomplish this off the top of my head. All right, we can create a vector 3 that is a 0, 180, 0. All right, so I can come in here, and instead of saying quaternion identity, we can say a new vector 3, 0, 180, 0. Oh, it wants a quaternion, not a vector 3. Ooh, what's the W? Well, I don't know what the W dude is. So we can do a couple things. We can go ahead and say quaternion temp, I'll just say rot for rotation, is equal to quaternion dot identity. Then we can say rot dot y is equal to 180. And then we'll pass it rot here. So that'll be our rotation of 180 degrees off the identity. We probably could have done it with the other way, but I don't know what that W is for. I think the W is, no, it wouldn't be that rotation. I don't know what the W is for. I'd be making it up. But now he should be facing the right way because we rotated him 180 on the Y. Well, here, I'll just have him die where it's most convenient for him to die. We'll have him, all right, he's been hit. And now he's facing the right direction and he's back in business. The other thing we could have done is we could have remembered the rotation of the, just like we're remembering the position of the golem, we could have remembered his rotation. We're already remembering his transform. So the other thing we can just do in here is we can say, I'm not going to remember this dude's position. Dump the golem's position. Instead, I'm just going to grab his whole transform. Because the transform has all three things we need, right? Well, we only need two of them, but he has everything. So I'm not going to remember the vector 3 golem pause because I already have that information stored inside of my golem transform. So now what I can do is I can say this dot golem transform dot position, and then this guy would be this dot golem transform dot rotation. So we're going to position this guy at the place that our old golem was at before he kicked the bucket, and we're also going to rotate him to be equal to wherever that guy was rotated. Make sense? So should be fairly streamlined. Oh, interesting. So the transform, that's why he didn't go back into the other position. The transform is passed by address. So his value actually disappears when the dude is killed. Okay, so when we stored the transform over game object and then we destroyed the game object, that transform lost. Vector 3s are struct, so they're passed by value. Where the transform itself is an object and is passed by reference, and that reference is garbage collected when the golem died. So we actually don't have, I mean, let's prove it real quick, and let's just assume that this whole rotation thing is the problem. I don't think it is. So we're going to say quaternion.identity. I don't think he's going to be in that new position because this position here isn't going to be something that's readable because the object is null after the golem was destroyed. Okay, yeah, we gotta. Yeah, see right down here. Missing reference exception. The object type transform has been destroyed, but you're still trying to access it. So transforms are passed by reference, whereas vector 3s are passed by value. That's an important thing to get into our notes. All right, everybody understands what that means? That was a 200 concept, the pass by value versus pass by reference thing. Pass by value / reference. Transforms are passed by reference. Vector 3s are passed by value. So transforms are passed by reference. Vector 3s are passed by value. Reference. Okay. So with that in mind, we actually need to go and grab the two vector 3s associated with this position and rotation rather than the transform, and then we'll be back in business. So we'll say private vector 3 golem pause, private vector 3 golem rot. We'll dump the golem transform. We don't need that anymore. Steal this guy. So this dot golem pause is equal to the position of the transform before we kill it. This dot golem rot is equal to the rotation of the transform before we kill it. And this guy's not a vector 3, he's a quaternion, right? So we'll grab the quaternion associated with our golem rot and the position, which is a vector 3. So then up here, when we want to get him out of position in a rotation, this dot golem pause, and this guy will be this dot golem rot, the quaternion. All right, so when we're about to kill him, preserve his position in rotation, destroy him, start the coroutine, 2 seconds later, instantiate him at his old position and his old rotation. All right, and there we go. All right, so we're seeing here that we have this big list of pumpkins that keep spawning, and each one of those is going to be taking up some system resources. And if we just leave this running for a while, our game's going to get more and more and more sluggish because you have all these game objects that are still in existence. All right, so what we want to do is we want those pumpkins to die off. So a couple different ways we can do it. We can have a pumpkin script. So we already have a pumpkin script, right? And we can look at, so let's just, I'm going to do this probably I'm going to say the easiest way, the way with the least number of moving parts here. Okay, so initially, I'm going to take the floor. I'm going to go ahead and just for a quick moment, I'm going to take a pumpkin prefab. And I'm going to drop him there. We're going to go up above. I'm going to move, am I moving the right? Move him here. Move him here. Turn back here.
These are really low.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll bring him, wrong way. I'll bring him up here. So we're going to say, 25's off. Once his y is less than -25, kill him. So for the homework assignment, just go into your pumpkin. Now we can do this in update, or we can do this in fixed update. You can choose if you want him to die as quick as possible. We can do it inside of update. I'm going to do it inside of fixed update, which only gets called every once. It gets called 60 times per second. All right. So I'm just going to ask a question in here. If this dot transform dot position dot y is less than -25, destroy this .game object. That's it. Once it falls far enough, it's too far down on the screen, kill it. All right, so it's strongly suggested suicide. So we'll go ahead and this is our extra pumpkin we just created. I'm going to dump him. Okay. We'll go ahead and hit play, and we should see that our collection of pumpkins are going to be much more controlled. Okay, see them killing themselves off? Okay, anybody solve it that way? Okay, it's a pretty easy solution. All right, so that doesn't mean it's the only solution, right? What's nice about this solution is you're making the pumpkins in charge of their own death. You are doing logic. Well, let's see what's nice about it. Pumpkin's in charge of his own death, and you're basing the death off of a position on Y, that you can control how far down he is below the floor. Now, having said that, you are costing yourself CPU cycles because you're asking a question. We saved ourselves a little bit by doing it inside a fixed update here. So 60 times per second, we're asking the question as a pumpkin. Am I less than 25? Am I less than negative 25? Am I less than negative 25? Over and over and over again, 60 times a second for each pumpkin. Is that a big deal for our processors today? Probably not. It's much, much, much less of a big deal than our the graphics it's taking to show these pumpkins. And at the same time, the CPU power is going to take to constantly update the vector 3 associated with like the position on our pumpkin as it's falling into oblivion. Having said that, in fact, you might actually, I haven't let it fall long enough to test this, but if something did fall forever, because, you know, let's say this is more of a how do numbers work type thing. If you have a byte data type, and the value is, so byte data types can hold values in the range of negative 128 to positive 127. So if the value is 127 and you add 1 to it, what's the new value in a byte? So I have a byte that we're saying can hold negative 128 to positive 127. That's the range of values. I go ahead and I put 127 in it, print it out. It says 127, right? Now I add 1 to it. I print it out again. What's it going to show? Negative 128. Okay, and this has to do with what we're talking about in 325 right now with 2's complement. Okay, if you have the largest negative number that will fit into something and you add 1 to it, you'll have an overflow, and now you have the smallest number that'll fit in there. So you actually can create an infinite loop based on a byte. Well, you can do it based on an int too. It'll just be longer until it resets. But where it just keeps counting up and then count. So it'll go 127, negative 128, negative 127, negative 127, blah, 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 127, negative 128, so on and so forth, over and over again. So I'm guessing these are floats. I think we've seen plenty of evidence that they are floats that are storing the y position on, x, y in position on a vector 3. So if we let it run long enough where it fell so far down, kept subtracting until it actually was at the maximum up. And then it fell again, and we waited. I mean, it's going to take some time, right? You waited. It would eventually fall through your vision again. See what I'm saying? It's kind of an interesting thing about how numbers work, right? So we probably don't want to risk that in our world here, even though chances are they're not going to be on the Gollum dodging pumpkins level that long. They could be. It might be somebody setting the international record or something. It's a thing. So we probably don't want to do that. So we're going to kill off our pumpkins. But we do want to be, we do want to consider our logic here and say, okay, well, we're putting something inside a fixed update or even inside of update. We talked about this before. We don't want this to be incredibly long-winded in terms of the amount of time it takes to process. In this case, I think we're okay. Asking one question, not the end of the world. We are doing it per pumpkin, but we don't have that many pumpkins on our screen at any point in time as we've written it now. So this is probably not a problem. but at least something we want to filter through our mind and say, is this the right place to put it? All right, so this is one approach. Now, so another approach, rather than do this in fixed update where each pumpkin just asks, where am I on the Y? And if I'm too low, kill me or kill myself. Now we're going to go ahead and let's put a collider. So I'm going to go ahead and what I'm going to do, I think this will make it easier. I'm going to take our floor. I'm going to duplicate it. So I have a second floor. Then I'm going to drop that second floor down a little bit. Now, just because sometimes pumpkins fall off the, here, I'll just drop it a little bit more. Just because sometimes the pumpkins fall off the sides and stuff like that because they're bumping into each other, I'm going to go ahead and make this a much larger landing area. So I'm going to go above this guy. And we're going to scale him. I'm going to do it with the scale tool. So we'll scale him this way. And we'll scale him this way. All right. Just in case. We've seen some of those pumpkins really shoot up in the air, right? So okay, we have a nice death landing zone here, right? So we just have kind of a secondary floor. Now what we can do here, well here, I'm going to go ahead and let's put the collider on him first. So he already, well, he has a collider. We're going to retag this guy. So this is the second floor. So we're going to create a, let's see, do we have any? Yeah, we can just use the tag called finish. Just use one of the tags. You know, so we'll use a tag that's already there. So this is tagged finish now. So now we're going to ask the question. A pumpkin is going to detect collisions with something, and if because he's already colliding with the floor, right? He's already colliding. He's already checking collisions. Well, he's colliding with the floor, but we're not caring about that. He's colliding with golems, with players. We do care about that. Now we can say, did you collide with finish? Did you collide with something that's supposed to end you? If yes, destroy yourself. All right. So we'll go into our golem here, or not our golem, our pumpkin. And inside of our onCollision enter, we'll throw an else if. Collision.gameObject.tag is equal to finish. You know, really you could, well, else if will be quicker. I'll talk about that in a second. You have to ask well, let's talk about it now. You have to ask the question, is it possible for a pumpkin to bump into the golem as well as the finish floor at the same time? I think as we have it created, the answer is no. So we can do it else if here. Otherwise, if we want to handle two different collisions that might happen at the same time, we'd really have to put this as just an if. And what's the downside of having two ifs next to each other?
Ask the question, please.
Yeah, we are always asking both questions. 100% of the time, we're saying, if this, do some stuff. Regardless of whether that's fired or not, we're going to ask this other question. If I throw the else in front of it, we only waste our time asking this question if this guy failed. Make sense? So this is again, a time thing. These are things we probably care more about in game development than we probably are going to care about if we're writing a business application or something. Not that you shouldn't care about this as like a good programmer. You know, they're kind of good programming practice and you know, writing readable code and things like this. But the punchline is sometimes it matters more than other times. In a game, probably not a game of this size, but in general, they would add up, right? In a game, you probably want to be a little bit more careful about asking more questions than you have to ask, doing more things than you have to do, things like that. You know, if something doesn't have to happen on a dime, put it inside a fixed update instead of update. So it's happening a maximum of 60 times a second instead of however good your graphics card is, times per second. All right. So if it's finish, we'll say destroy this dot game object, and he'll just kill himself off. We'll go ahead and comment out the code we have in fixed update right now. So now he kills himself a different way. Instead of asking himself 60 times a second, am I below a certain place on Y? If so, kill myself. Now he's going to say, oh, I bumped into something. So our on collision enter callback gets called. I bumped into something. Was it a player? If yes, kill off the player. If it was the finish, the subfloor, kill off me. Make sense? All right. So that's what this guy is going to do now. And let's just make sure everything looks copacetic. We'll probably change the view of that floor here in a second, because right now you see this extra floor, right? You could actually maybe make it look kind of cool and have the floor like have flames on it or something like that. You know, it's like, you know, because you're in the depths of hell, right? With the golem dodging the pumpkins. This is where this happens.
This is what hell's like.
This is what hell's like. Probably, we should build this game and send it to Pastor Smith. This is just our own little rendition. I mean, 10, 15 minutes of this is kind of fun. After that, if this is an eternity, I mean, there's not much worse, right?
There's no escape. You just respawn in 2 seconds.
And you're invincible. And like, oh, I'm good. And because then you could just sit down and take a nap, right? But it's not the way it works. All right, but we probably want this guy to not be visible like this, so we can either make him look cool or something. But if we just want him to be there, but as if he's not there, what we would do is we go to that subfloor and we turn off his mesh render. So a render is what makes something show up. So we'll turn off his mesh renderer. He's still there. We just can't see him.
Do you still need like all the? Did you erase all the code you had before? The -0.5 over there.
I just commented it out.
Oh, okay. Because like I did the same thing you did, and it's not doing it. It's just that it's rolling right off the collider.
Well, then you didn't do the same thing that I did.
Oh yeah. Well,
You did something similar to what I did. All right. Well, in any case, these guys seem to be working. Let's go. Let's look at what you did here. So one thing to make sure, positioning wise. So you saw I was able to make this guy invisible by turning off his mesh render. All right. But he's still a thing, right? All right. So he's still a thing. For your subfloor, I'm going to turn it back on just so we can see him. For your subfloor, first of all, make sure, I'm going to do something here. Oh, interesting. It did it to both floors? Oh, it did it to both floors because I'm changing the ground material. I'm not changing the color of this floor. I'm changing the actual physical material associated with this floor. Make sense? All right. So as a starting point, make sure that your subfloor is completely encompassing the real floor and below it. Okay, so make sure it's plenty big and make sure it is hovering below your real floor. So we have something for it to hit. Starting point. Then make sure you tag your subfloor. Okay, I just chose to use the finish tag, but if you wanted to make it something maybe a little bit more self-explanatory, you can go and add a tag. We'll call this guy Death Floor or something like that. Then go back to our subfloor. I'm going to rename this guy to, we'll just call him Death Floor. We'll set his tag to Death Floor now, but then make sure in your code you now test against Death Floor. All right, so you have your subfloor. Make sure it's positioned on the screen correctly. Make sure it's tagged correctly. Make sure it has a box collider and a rigid body, which it should. Well, he doesn't have to have a rigid body, I guess. Yeah. But your floor itself also didn't have a rigid body. Didn't have to have a rigid body because we turned off that stuff. It just has to have a collider. Although having a rigid body for your top floor will make the pumpkins act more real because the physics interacts with rigid bodies. So as the pumpkin is bouncing along the floor, it'll act real if it's on the real floor. Your death floor doesn't need that because we're not watching pumpkins bounce along the floor or something, but you can leave the rigid body in. Make sure it has a box collider. Make sure it's not set up as this trigger.
Okay.
So then in your code for your pumpkin, in fixed update, notice I commented out the if transform.
Yeah.
But then up here inside of on collision enter, I said, if it's a player, do the kill off player thing. Else if it's a death floor, kill off the pumpkin.
Yeah.
So what did you do differently?
I think I just put it in the wrong place. I put it in,
Yeah, because we're interested in, this is from the pumpkin's perspective. This pumpkin script is what we are attaching to all of our pumpkins. So we're interested in, did this pumpkin collide with something? If so, do I care about what I hit?
you just gotta apply it to pumpkin.
Huh?
You have to apply it to pumpkin.
Well, this is, I mean, all your pumpkins should already have the script on them.
Right. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, we just edited the script that pumpkins already have. All right.
Yeah. I just had it in the wrong script.
All right. So a couple different ways that, but does it make sense?
Yeah.
Why you had it in the wrong place? Okay, so you didn't quite have exactly what I had. You had almost.
Yeah.
Almost what I had. All right. So makes some sense. Let's go ahead and add into our notes the idea of a renderer. Renderers are things that make something appear on the screen. It's being rendered on the screen. So we can make something invisible, but it's still there. Notice we get a little representation of this guy on here. So we kind of know there's something down there. So let's get that into our notes. Renderer. A game object's component that makes it appear on the screen. Do not confuse this with the ability to disable an entire game object, which will also make it not appear, but it will also be as if it is not even in the scene. A game object with a disabled renderer is still in the scene and can be collided with, etc. All right, and the thing I'm talking about there is up here, if I take my death floor, so I'll turn the mesh renderer back on, but now I take my death floor and I disable it there. So this is kind of a way for you to test objects. You can say, well, I don't know if I want to remove this from my scene officially forever yet, but I'm just going to turn it off here. Now we don't see him, even though that looks pretty similar to the idea of him having his renderer turned off. Right now, he is not there. He cannot be collided with. He won't interact with anything. Not what we want. So we want him in the scene, but invisible by turning the renderer off. Make sense? All right. So what would be the next logical thing for our game here? Maybe score. Maybe score. Could have a timer. All right, so let's pop open real quick and just see where he goes with this. Kind of want to finish this up if we can. So I'm going to bump forward quite a bit.
Including spawn point length. So if this variable, this length.
He might not get into canvases for score and stuff. Here, he definitely does in like the next game. You can do it.
What is up, guys? Fahir here from awesomedudes.com, and I want us to create a simple game. Just
Somebody's upset. You can do it.
Is there a way to set a constraint to like how far the golem can move on the floor? Because like right now, I'm pretty sure it's like you just keep moving on.
Oh, and fall off the floor. Well, good question. So you tell me. The short answer is yes, you can, but now it's a matter of how.
Right.
You probably wouldn't do it through direct constraints because our ability with our constraints is we can either have it on or off. Okay, yeah. You really want him to kind of have bumpers. Yeah. So almost think about bowling, right? When they set it up for the kids, you know, they put the bumpers up where it doesn't matter where you throw it, it's going to hit pins, right? I use that too.
So you basically just do the same thing with the floor, but instead of killing it, just like there, it can't move.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to do it as a collider. So what we could do here. This doesn't seem to be working real great. Let's just see if I can get it here real quick, and then we'll go.
I mean, can you just build a wall too?
You certainly could, but we probably don't want to see it. We kind of want to maybe make it seem like it's not there. But we could have them in like the death box, maybe have spikes on the side. Like you have to. That could even be part of the game, right? Yeah, it's not going to want to do this. That's fine. Not the end of the world. So what we can do here is let's go back to our normal floor. And what we'll do is we're going to put a couple of, since we just have to do it on his line. So actually, let's go to the golem. And we'll look at the golem from above so we can see this. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop in. I'm going to create a 3D game object. We could probably do these as, probably do it as a cube. That way he's hitting a flat wall. So I'll throw a cube there and we're going to position this cube over here to the side. All right, and then let's get a better view of this guy. All right, it looks like it's not too bad. I'm going to zoom in here on this cube. That way we give the golem as much running room as possible. Look at the cube from the side. We probably could lower it some or just make it bigger. Let's just do that. Let's make it taller. That way we make sure we hit them. Okay, so there's our, and we'll make it a little wider too. So it kind of has a wall over here. We'll Go back on the golem from above. All right, so there's our wall. I think we can probably position it even a little further out. Oh, wrong way. It's just going to be on the X. Well, it doesn't really matter. You can sit there and screw with it to get the perfect positioning. Just call that good. This guy already has a box collider, so we should already be able to bump into him. So there's this wall over there, but we have now fallen off. Where's our golem here? Oh, we actually haven't fallen off because we have his position. I can just bring him back in here. I assume I can bring him back in here. But in any case, the guy didn't keep us from hitting there. He has a collider. So if we chose to use the collider, we could work with them. But really what we need this cube to have, we'll call this guy a wall. We need him to have a rigid body. All right, and we're going to turn gravity off for that rigid body, otherwise it will fall through the world, right? Right, then hit the ground. All right, I want to zoom out a little bit so we can see this more. Actually, what I'm gonna do just for the moment.
You want to this like its X and Y and all that, so that it doesn't like knock over.
Probably. I'm going to move it in a little bit so we can see its movement. So let's do position. We should be able to see it now. All right, so right off the bat, it bounced off of the floor because it's kind of sitting at a weird angle on the floor, right? So now we're going to go with freezing position. So we're going to freeze the position, definitely on Y, definitely on Z, probably on X too. Okay, we don't want it to go anywhere. We can even say let's freeze the rotation so it doesn't do any twisting when he hits it. So we're just locking this thing down. Okay, but he can still move through it. Oh, because he was invincible. Ah, that's actually an interesting thing. When he's invincible, his collider is turned off. So he couldn't interact with the other collider. Right? So as long as he's invincible, he can get through this wall. And now he's not invincible anymore. So now he's stuck. he's stuck over there. He can't get back. He has to wait for a pumpkin to kill him. Yeah, it looks like we're going to get one here in a second. All right, now we're back. We can sneak back through. See, it's a fun game again. All right, so let's see here. So yeah, you would have to. So if you didn't want it to work that way, we certainly don't want him to have to get stuck, right? We don't want him to have to get stuck. How could we modify our project right now where he couldn't get stuck behind the wall, but at the same time, our guy could still be invincible against pumpkins? It's actually kind of a fun question.
We have to redo how the golem responds entirely.
Well, not responds, but the invincibility part of it. Yeah, right now we're doing his invincibility based on turning off a collider, right? Where we would have to then change the way we do invincibility by saying, you know what, maybe we should have our golem still have a collider that's on, but when he's invincible, he chooses to ignore pumpkins. Does that make sense? Or pumpkins choose to ignore him. Is the kind of the bigger thing there. Does that make some sense? Mm-hmm. So you can kind of choose to go that direction. In order to do that, though, now you have to, so he's always going to have his collider on. Just at some points in time, he's not going to care whether or not he bumped into a pumpkin. So now let's look at our code here real quick. Who kills who? Now it probably does matter. The way we have it working right now is a pumpkin notices that he collided with a golem, right? So pumpkin notices he collided with a golem and he kills the golem. And then he spawns a brand new golem who turns his collider off. I think we can. Well, so let me finish this thought then. So now he spawns as a brand new golem, turns his collider off, so now nothing can stop him. Pumpkins can't stop him. The wall can't stop him. The only thing that's really controlling him to not fall through the floor is the fact that we have him constrained, right? If we want him to be stoppable, what we really need to do is keep his collider on, but choose to have him not interact with pumpkins. But right now, it's the pumpkin that notices whether or not he cares about hitting a player. That makes sense? He cares about hitting a player. So we would have to let all pumpkins know to ignore a player for those 3 seconds. Does that make sense? So all pumpkins would have to have that thing. Now, in order for us to raise that, we can say, oh, well, we can just put that in our pumpkin script, and after we kill the player, we'll just have our pumpkin, when he asks this question, did I attack or did I collide with a player, and was I allowed to collide with a player? Just a second question there. If both of those things are true, then I'll hit them. So we can have a little Boolean value up here at the top of this script and say, am I allowed to collide with a player, yes or no, true or false? If I hit a player and I'm allowed to hit them and kill them, then I will. Otherwise, I won't. But the issue is that every single instance of our pumpkins will have their own copy of this script. And only the pumpkin that actually bumped into the player will have his flag set as, I can't touch players for a little bit. I have to ignore them until my coroutine turns my flag off. That makes sense? So we really need a way of letting all pumpkins know that we are not allowed to hit players. We can actually do this through a singleton. If you had some of our, you'll do this in 250 and in some of our upper division classes where we have kind of a global object that all of our pumpkins can refer to and say, hey, am I allowed to hit a player? You know, and if he says no, then all the pumpkins will follow those rules. Okay, and we don't have time to show that right now, but we'll do it in one of the later games anyways. I think he might even do one in a later game. So that's one thing. That's one thing we could do. We could also, I think we could do this with a static variable in here. I'm pretty sure that static variables would stay alive, where we can create a private static bool can hit player. This guy would start off as true. And then for those 250 people in here, is this a class field or an instance field? Class. Why is it a class field? Because the dude I have highlighted. Okay, it's a class field because the dude I have highlighted. How do we call class fields? Using the name of the class in which it was defined. So now what I can do is in here, I can ask the question, could I collide with a player? And pumpkin dot can hit player. So, and I'm allowed to hit the player. Then do all this stuff. Otherwise, when I respawn the golem, he comes in here. He respawns. we would then have to go into our Golem code, because he's the guy that does this. And rather than disable and enable the collider, we would leave his collider on. And in here, instead of turning the collider back, we would leave his collider on rather than turning it off and then back on. We would come in here, we would say pumpkin dot, let's see, yeah, oh, I made it private, hold on. Turbo mode. Yeah, this guy's private. He's only accessible inside that class. So now I can say pumpkin dot and it's not going to let me go across two scripts like that. I don't think so. Let me save this. Let me make it completely public. Even though they're in the same namespace, it's not letting me see it. Can hit player gets set back to true. When he's first born, we're going to say pumpkin dot can hit player is equal to false. So initially, a player can't be hit. We'll tell the pumpkin when he collides with things like players, I hit a player, but am I allowed to hit him? If I'm allowed to hit him, then I'll go and do my stuff. So this will allow the logic to, we don't have time to run it, but this will allow the logic to allow us to make him invincible or not invincible based on that. But we're still going to have a problem right now where they're both still rigid bodies. And now our pumpkins and our players will still physically interact. They just won't destroy, the golem won't get destroyed. So the golem can sit there and sweep pumpkins away and stuff like that. So it'll still be a little weird since we still have a collider. So need to probably work with that a little bit to get it working differently. All right. So for your homework for Monday or for Tuesday, why don't we go ahead and just finish this guy off by getting those walls up with the correct colliders, make the walls invisible so we can't see them. We're going to say that it's, for right now, let's just say it's okay for him to, when he's invincible. Let's not mess with the invincibility stuff because I need to show you a couple other things to make it right. So let's not mess with that. He's going to show you some new things in the next video. And then what I'll do is I'll put the next assignments up. We're going to, so remember I leave for India tonight. And I'm not back until the 11th. So I'll put the assignments up. What they're going to do is we're going to start the first game, which is like a Diablo 3 type game. And I'll say go through this time in the video. So watch the video, do the project up to that point, and then you'll submit screenshots to it. So each one will be about the same amount we accomplish in a class. All right, so you'll have 4 steps forward in our game between now and when I get back. Sound good? All right, so I'll put those up, and I will see you when I see you. Well, I'll see some of you in an hour or half hour or whenever it is. All right.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
So, my game works fine. Not fine, but whenever I add that part of the script here,
Yeah.
like else, if it hits the finish or like the like you said, death floor.
Yeah.
It destroys the pumpkin.
Yeah.
But if
it's not destroying the pumpkin. You want to destroy the. Oh no, yeah, destroy the pumpkin for this one. Yeah.
If I delete it, it works fine. The golem will turn he will turn off invincibility. But once I added that else statement, the golem won't go back to his rigid body, or his box collider won't turn on. So he'll die the first time.
Okay.
And then the pumpkins will despawn.
Show me.
After
Well, yeah. So the pumpkins are despawning always, right?
But then after like it won't.
Right, but the pumpkins are still despawning.
Yes.
So this has nothing to do with the pumpkins. This is the golem.
This is the golem.
Yeah. So let's go. Show me the golem script.
Well, is it in golem?
Yeah. So golem. Well, that's how we had written in class. So now show me your pumpkin then. If you wrote it in pumpkin. So we did it a couple different ways, right?
Yeah.
So when you start the coroutine to respawn, that's that guy. We instantiate a golem. We turn off his collider. Then we start the coroutine to turn off invincibility. Turn off invincibility says wait 2 seconds and then set the player collider to enabled. But we are, so this player collider is equal to new golem collider. We're setting it enabled to be false. And do this. This waits for 2 seconds. Then it sets the player's collider back to enabled. Destroy it. Respawn. Wait. Creates new golem.get component collider. Turn it off. Turn it back on. That all looks right to me.
This is just a script that I wrote, but like it doesn't. I'm not really.
Yeah, I got you. Here's your pumpkins. Your pumpkins have colliders, but they're not rigid bodies. Your golem is a rigid body with constraints, and he is a capsule collider. And we have this move script. The pumpkin has the pumpkin script. It looks like it should work to me. Let's see if we get an error down here at the bottom.
Does that speed it up?
No, I'm not pushing anything.
Oh.
Let me get this recording stopped.